Welcome to the Wake Up Dad Show. This is episode number 39.
I had a very narrow definition of what it meant to be a man and father, so a strong man and father. So, I was raised that, logic is strength and emotions are weakness. And my belief was that in order to be strong, I needed to make decisions based on logic and reason and really not let emotions or my heart get it too involved with the equation.
Are you confused and overwhelmed about your role in all the craziness that is being a dad? Are you struggling to create the life you hope for? Are you looking for other dads to share your struggles and your triumphs? Or do you just need help waking up in the morning? Join your host, Dr. Scott Vatcher, as he explores the amazing and sometimes crazy world of being a dad. This is the Wake Up Dad Show.
Hey Dad, and welcome to another episode of the Wake Up Dad Show. This show is dedicated to you, the dad who wants more. More success, time, health, fitness, connection, passion, and all-around awesomeness. I'm your host, Dr. Scott, and on today's episode, I have a very special guest. His name is Mackenzie. He's an expert on peak human performance. He's a father, speaker, author, and coach. He teaches audiences around the world how cultivating vulnerability will liberate the strength, wisdom, and courage we already possess. He's a survivor of his wife's battle with bipolar disorder and subsequent suicide, and has overcome a decade-long battle with alcohol. When he stopped running from grief and fear, he became the husband and father his family deserves. His driving purpose is to help lift those who want more from their lives to increasingly higher levels of personal and professional performance. Jason is a strength finder who works with you to help you ask powerful, affirmative questions about what's best about you and your life. He'll help you dream about the future, then guide you in carrying the best version of yourself forward. So, welcome to the show, Jason.
Thank you, Scott. It's an honor to be on your show.
So let's get into it. There's a lot of stuff I want to get into with you because I think this is going to be an awesome episode for dads out there listening. But let's get started with your story of becoming a dad. Tell us about how you became the dad that you are today.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so I'm 43 years old right now, and I'm married. I'm on my second marriage, and I have two daughters. One who is turning 13 in a few weeks, which is always an interesting time in their life, and the other one who is 11 and a half. My fatherhood story, or how I became the man I am today, is it's quite an interesting story. We had our daughters when I was about 30, and shortly after the birth of our second daughter, my first wife, and the biological mother of my daughters, was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And for your audience members who may not know what that is, it's a mental illness that is characterized by really huge mood swings, from crushing, soul-destroying depression to mania, which is very erratic and dangerous behavior, alcohol abuse, drug abuse. There was times she moved away to live in a homeless shelter. I mean, it was just 6 years of increasingly, or not increasingly, but I guess a never-ending cycle of sadness and despair and chaos. And ultimately, on March 26, 2010, she could no longer take the pain. I mean, she was just so tired of fighting this battle that she could not win, that Cindy decided to take her own life. And during that time, I really struggled because I had a very narrow definition of what it meant to be a man and father, so a strong man and father. So, I was raised that, logic is strength and emotions are weakness. And my belief was that in order to be strong, I needed to make decisions based on logic and reason and really not let emotions or my heart get it too involved with the equation. The problem with that was when Cindy was sick, I didn't give myself an outlet. I wasn't willing to talk about my feelings because I really had a hard time acknowledging I even had them. And so I really left myself with few options to deal with the stress of that very difficult time, and I turned to alcohol. And it's funny, looking back on it, because it actually, in my mind, it seemed to work, because it really caused me to feel a lot less fear and anxiety and sadness. But on the flip side, I felt far less joy and hope and optimism. And those were emotions that were already in preciously short supply during that time. And that was the time I would say I needed them the most, and I drank them away. But yeah, and then I clung on to this heroic persona of myself. I really bought into the person that I had created as this strong and decisive leader, fearless, action oriented, and all this kind of stuff. Standing by my wife, standing by my kids, and that really wasn't the truth. I mean, during those very dark years, I made some pretty horrific mistakes as far as being a husband, and just did some things that when I was pushed beyond my limit, that I regretted deeply. And I never told anybody those stories, though, because that didn't jive with my heroic, hero persona that I had created. So ultimately, I continued to drink for probably 4 years after Cindy's death, and it took a moment with my daughter, actually, to make me see what I was doing to myself. And it was a day it was just going to be the two of us, me and my younger daughter. She was 9 at the time, and I had promised her I was going to make the day very special, and like a daddy-daughter day. And I had really hyped it up, and we were both looking forward to it. And then when the day came around, I basically just got drunk the entire day while she played by herself. And at the end of the day, she came up to me and looked me in the eye and told me she was disappointed. And I guess at that moment, I just was too exhausted and too ashamed and too, I don't know, tired to continue living this lie and telling myself and everybody else all these crazy rationalizations. So at that moment, I just for whatever reason, I think it was my daughter having the courage to be honest with me, gave me the courage to be honest with myself. And I finally looked myself in the mirror, figuratively looked myself in the mirror, and said, I don't want this. I want something different. I'm better than this. And then from that point, I moved forward, and I stopped drinking. And man, over the last 2.5 years, everything has been completely different in my life. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Wow, that's quite the story. Thanks for sharing. And I think a big part of your movement that you're creating is all about vulnerability. And thanks for being so open and vulnerable, telling us about how you started this process out. I'm excited to explore that a little bit deeper, sort of that pivotal moment where you went from heroic persona or logic is strength to emotions are strength, vulnerability is strong. And I think it's a real typical bloke thing. And now bloke is the Australian term for like dude, sort of like manly, masculine sort of situation where, yeah, if we express our emotions, that's not a manly thing to do. We've got to drink them down, or we've got to fight them, or and in your case it was turning to alcohol. For somebody else, it may be turning to becoming a gym junkie, or illegal drugs, or sex, or any of those things. It's sort of like tools in the belt to help us cope, and certain tools are better than others. So how about we explore that a little bit more? How do you talk to men out there who, I'm sure you've talked to numerous men about situations they're typically in right now? Because I know there's some dads out there listening right now that are in the exact position that you were a couple of years ago and are just wondering, how do I get out of this? How did you turn that saying of logic is strength, emotions are weak into the exact opposite?
Yeah, that's a great question, Scott. So I think what happened with me was, in that moment where I decided that I wanted something different, I finally allowed myself to be vulnerable with myself. And I define vulnerability as having the courage to look at yourself in the mirror and be honest and without judgment about who you see staring back at you. So at that particular moment, I was able to finally just tell myself the truth, that I'm 41 years old. I drink every single day, drink heavily every single day. I'm causing my wife, this amazing woman who came into our lives to help us rebuild our family. I'm causing her no end of worry and concern, and now my kids are telling me I'm disappointed in me. And just being able to say that to myself liberated me to create something else. Because what I would typically do in the past is I would just cling to this idea of who I thought I was supposed to be. So it was like looking backwards to some, I don't know, discredited, version of myself. And I was just clinging to that with a death grip because I thought it was who I was supposed to be. And I didn't understand who I was if I didn't have that. So once I took stock of myself, took a fearless inventory, it freed me to move forward. And what I realized was once I stopped drinking, I realized something very profound, and that's that I had invented all of the fears that I was terrified of about being sober. I made them all up. So, how am I going to, it's just the typical things everybody says, how am I going to socialize? Are my friends still going to like me? Why can't I just have a few drinks like everybody else? Like all those weak-minded, limiting questions. Once I was sober, I realized those, not one of them came true. All of these fears that had held me prisoner for so long were all made up. And then I started questioning my entire life because I was thinking to myself, wow, that is shocking. What else? What other limiting beliefs do I have? And then one of the limiting beliefs I had was that I am stronger by compartmentalizing myself than I am as the whole human being I actually am. And so as I gave myself some time and space in, being sober, I started to experience these feelings that I had never really allowed myself to feel before. Like I started to feel anxiety sometimes, or I would feel sadness. Or a year after being sober, I started grieving my wife's death 5 years after she died. But on the flip side, I also started feeling passion and hope and optimism and gratitude like I had never really felt them before. And I started realizing, at first when I would have a day of like feeling sad or a period of time of feeling sad, I remember asking my wife, saying, I don't know what's wrong with me right now. I mean, this is a 41-year-old man saying, I don't know what's wrong with me. And my wife telling me, you're having a bad day, you idiot. It happens to everybody. This is not, but I had to let myself be in that space and not try to turn it off with alcohol or anything. And what I realized is, wow, there is a tremendous amount of strength that is to be gleaned from, letting myself experience the full human experience. And as I went through that, I realized that, wow, I'm learning so much about when I'm at my best. And, grieving my wife's death allowed me to put our relationship into context and to feel love towards her again and look at the past as the contribution what it is to my present and all of these things. And I realized that, wow, you know what? It's not always pretty and it can be a little bit messy sometimes, but we are vastly, vastly stronger when we don't deny a big part of who we are.
So how do you, we'll go back to vulnerability and your definition is sort of like being honest and without judgment of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I'll talk for myself, is that I find it really difficult to not be judgmental of myself. How is it that you get through that and not be judgmental of yourself and not in that roller coaster of emotional states, be okay with that? Because it's probably one of the biggest lessons you could ever learn as a human being, that it is okay to feel these emotions, and especially as a man, especially as a dad, because if we don't learn them early on enough, then we're going to pass these sort of situations or traits, whatever you want to call them, onto our kids, and that's where that sort of generational thing keeps going, where my dad did this, so I'm doing this. How do you sort of get that judgment out of the way? Is there any sort of thoughts you have about that, or like practical tips or suggestions that you could give dads out there about that?
Yeah, so I think, well, first of all, let me be, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm certainly not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm far better than I used to be, and I feel like I'm making continuous forward progress on eradicating judgment from my life. But I think what's important is I have a significant level of awareness of what judgment creates. So I really recognize it for me when when I judge myself, the natural extension of that is that I tend to judge other people as well, because it's always easier. This is a really repetitive or very common past behavior of mine, but it's really easy to tear other people down rather than build yourself up. So I used to do that quite a bit, and I just have a really, it doesn't feel good. So I've talked about it enough, and I've written about it enough, and I've coached people enough that I really try to, when I'm judging myself, I really try to bear witness to the thoughts that I'm having and not let myself be consumed by them, right? To try to step away from them and understand that these are my thoughts. These are not me, and I can observe them and let them go. And being present in the moment when if I get into a small cycle of feeling judgmental, it really helps me, because I also realize that in allowing myself to, like, I had to make some conscious decisions to say, okay, look, if I feel anxious right now, there's two things you can do. One of them is I guess there's more than two things you can do, but a few options you can do, or you can do what I just said, is bear witness to them, to the thoughts, and try to passively or neutrally observe them. Another thing you can do, though, is really let yourself be in that moment. And sometimes if I'm feeling anxious, I want to just be in that moment, because I want to understand it from at a very deep and fundamental level. And I think allowing yourself to do that and not being scared of being in a place that feels uncomfortable is a really great way to liberate yourself from judging yourself. Because I think for me, the other part of it is that lets me not sink into self-judgment is that I really, accepting myself as I am has made me realize that I am unique. And that to me, like, I'm not some caricature or some stereotype. I am a unique human being. And I really believe that. It sounds so simple to say it out loud, but it was something I did not understand, because I spent my whole life believing that I had to shoehorn myself into this mold that, of what it meant to be a strong man and father. And once I realized I was unique and embraced that idea and embraced that I am okay, like, I don't need to be perfect. There's no such thing as perfect. We're all different. We're all on our own journeys. And so when I embrace the fact that I'm unique, I naturally embrace the fact that everybody else is unique as well. And everybody else looks at the world through their own eyes, and their opinion is as equally valid as my opinion. And so as I operate my life on those, that's one of my sort of fundamental principles, is recognizing the strength in our uniqueness. It really has helped me free myself from a lot of the judgment I was carrying around before.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. I mean, to circle back to a couple of words you use that they're thrown around a lot, and they can have some difficult processes involved to make them happen. But when they do, there's such a magic that happens. Awareness, conscious decisions, judgment, being present, and being really comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like, those things alone will make all the difference in the world. So let's tell me about your book.
Yeah, so it's funny, as I realized, as I went through this personal journey and realized that what I was doing was being vulnerable. It was funny. It wasn't actually till I listened to an episode of the Tim Ferriss podcast with Brene Brown on it that I understood that vulnerability was the sort of what I was cultivating and what I was practicing and what I was preaching. So what I realized is as I evolved and I started sharing my story with people, the way people reacted to me was far different than what I expected. So I originally decided to start telling my story, not the heroic version of my story, but the unvarnished truth, because I wanted to help people with, I thought sharing my story might help people with dealing with addiction of some sort, or mental health issues, or something fairly specific to my own personal experience, or relatable to my own personal experience. And as I started telling my story, I realized, like, people started opening up to me about everything, about their lives. And it was this incredibly powerful realization that my vulnerability and authenticity was creating a safe place for them to be authentic. And I realized how desperate people are for that. I never paid any attention to it because I ignored the importance of it in my own life. And as I started to create that safe place for people, people started to flock to it, I guess. And because ultimately what we all want is to be accepted as who we are. Even we all want to accept ourselves as who we are, and we all want other people to accept us as who we are. And as I started to get more develop a deeper understanding about this idea of vulnerability, I started to talk about it and write about it a lot and quite passionately. And I decided to write a book about it because I can look around me, I'm sure most of us can. We can look around and I could see that this is a message that needs to be shared with men and fathers. And so as I wrote the book, it was really it's targeted towards men, but it's really applicable to almost anybody. And what I do in the book is I debunk some of the myths around vulnerability, like vulnerability is weakness and vulnerability puts you at risk and all of those things. And I redefine vulnerability for what it is, which is really, showing your authentic self to the world and marshaling the full power of you to create something different in your future. And I talk a lot about, how that dramatically improves our relationship with our kids, and how vulnerability makes you stronger, how it makes you wiser, and how it makes you more courageous, how it makes you a better leader, how it makes you creates a positive feedback loop in your life, and how it will help you leave a legacy that your kids will willingly carry on. So it's really a total debunking of the typical definition of vulnerability, and then redefining it throughout the book and giving concrete tips and tricks and examples and lessons about how it'll make men better husbands and fathers and partners.
And how long has the book been out?
The book has been out for about a month.
Brand new, fantastic. So we'll definitely have some stuff in the show notes page about how to look at that book and how to get it all the way around the world. Isn't it this amazing that you're in London, Ontario, not London, England, and I'm on the Gold Coast of Australia. I just love it.
Me too.
And so we'll definitely get that info out and some info about how people can get in touch with you. Tell us about what you do as a coach.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So what I do is I help people ask powerful questions in order to shape reframe their past and shape their future. So one of the things that I used to do all the time and that kept me very limited was to ask weak-minded questions, as I was saying earlier. So, again, why can't I drink like the normal people? Or why did my wife have to commit suicide? Or why did this happen to me? Or why is life so hard? Or all these questions that really focus your energy in the wrong spot. And so as I kind of grew and I started to develop a much more positive view of the world and frame of mind, I started to notice that it did not feel good to me, either in my personal life or my professional life, to be constantly focused on the things that were broken. Because we create more of what we focus on. And so I started to think about how is it that I could create, help myself and help people focus on what was already working. And through that kind of discovery or investigation, I stumbled across a methodology called appreciative inquiry. And appreciative inquiry is basically just that. It's a study of what gives human systems life when they're functioning at their best. So in other words, I help people look at some of the things, the high point experiences from their past. When were you at your best? Connect to a time that felt meaningful to you. And then let's really understand that and understand everything that you brought to bear, everything that, other people contributed. What were the environmental situations? Like really doing a root cause analysis of success, basically, and then helping people dream of an incredible future where they can carry the best of themselves from the past and present into that future. And it's a really empowering, liberating, and strength-finding way of helping people and organizations create and sustain positive change.
And so, is it thebookofopen.com? Is that right?
It is thebookofopen.com.
And so that's where people can get the book and inquire about checking you out as a coach.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. Appreciative inquiring. I like it. There's a quote that I think it was Tony Robbins. I could be wrong. It says, "The quality of your life is defined by the quality of the questions that you ask yourself."
Yes,
And
I love that quote.
Is that Tony Robbins?
I'm not sure who it is actually, but
could be. Who cares? It doesn't really matter. I thought it was Tony, but that's a quote that I heard probably a decade ago, and it has really helped me to define my life, because you absolutely get more of what you focus on. And how many people, like, I don't know if you find this in your work when you speak with people, especially probably at the beginning of the coaching, something as simple as, "How's your day?" And I don't know how often I'll get something like, "Oh, not bad." I go, "Wow, just not bad, hey? That's not good, right?" Just just defining your day as, "Oh, not bad," compared to viewing it in a different perspective. And when I do that, and this is probably doing appreciative inquiring with clients that I see, I say, "Okay, well, what was the best part of your day?"
Mm-hmm.
And so just getting them into that mindset of, okay, something that was good today. And I don't care who you are, there has to have been something that was good. You know, to focus on whatever that is. And that's why I think, what is your perspective or viewpoint on, say, journaling?
Yeah, so I will answer that in a sec, but I just wanted to actually follow up quickly on the point you just made. So a good example with our kids would be, looking at, the power of our questions would be, if your child comes home and gets a specific mark, say they get an 85% on a paper they've written, there's two things you can do. The first is you can say, "What did you do wrong? And how can we fix what you did wrong so you can be better?" Or the alternative is to say, "Let's talk about everything that you did right or we did right that got you to that mark, and let's find a way to do more of it." So maybe it's, how did you structure your time in a way that allowed you to achieve that mark? How did we support you? What was the best of how we supported you? And how can we do more of that? And, what was it about the subject matter that you felt the most passionate about? What interested you the most? Asking questions like that in collaboration or in partnership with your child is a much, much more positive and enjoyable way to talk about how to create something better in the future.
I totally agree. And even if they got a 50.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
To focus on that positive. And I think the mindset, like, I don't know if it's a default for us as human beings, or is it just something we've been conditioned into believing, but it's about trying to fix what's wrong as opposed to focusing on our strengths.
Absolutely. Yeah, so to answer your question on journaling, how my whole journey started actually was I decided to start writing a gratitude journal. I had read Hal Elrod's A Miracle Morning, and really drove home to me the importance of having a morning routine. Really, that book changed my life, actually. And I started writing my gratitude journal. But I decided to start posting it online, actually, just because I thought that, I don't know, maybe it would help somebody. And really, the response was really quite lovely, actually. People just really seemed to enjoy reading it. And it didn't get a tremendous amount of traffic, but I got a lot of positive feedback, and it helped me keep going. So that really helped me. And I still, to this day, I take a moment every day to do a couple things. I write what I'm grateful for, and I also write down what I will do for the day, what contribution I will make, no matter how small, to be of service to somebody else. So I spend a few minutes thinking about that and just jot it down. And so I don't do deep levels of journaling, but I always take time every day to write down a few things that are important to me and to help set my mindset, set myself up, for the right mindset for the rest of the day. And I wouldn't want to give that up. It really helps me.
you would be probably not actually, but it's amazing how many people have talked about some form of a miracle morning, whether it be Hal Elrod or Robin Sharma, who have these morning routines. And I'll tell you, it's something that is extremely common to very successful people. So the take-home message, check out Hal Elrod's The Miracle Morning. He's on my list to get onto the podcast for next year. He's brilliant, and same with Robin Sharma. So there's some name dropping there for you dads out there to go check out online. So
I just wanted to say what I realized I think the most powerful realization for me about that was that I was a really cause and effect type of person. So in other words, if I'm going to spend time doing something, I want to see a quantifiable result that I can measure. That tends to be the way I think about things. But what that book and that routine made me realize is that it doesn't really work that way. So I can do these things that don't produce anything measurable, but they set me up for the right mindset to see opportunities that I wouldn't have been able to see otherwise, and to look at the world through a different lens throughout the entire day. And that was a very important realization for me about the power of mindset.
I'm a real sort of goals oriented kind of guy too myself. So I'm really like my wife is very into yoga for restorative practices, and I'm more like the CrossFit kind of guy. So I'm really trying to balance that out and have some things in my life that don't need specific measurable goals, because I think a lot of people need that. I think all of us need it to a certain degree, but we also need that balance of restorative practices that aren't, hey, I can tick that off the box now because that goal is achieved. It's something that is more in tune with just the rhythms and flows of life. So I totally get what you're saying there. There's a question that's come to mind, and I hope it's okay that I ask this. I'm going to ask it in a couple of different ways. And just see where it takes us, because we're quickly running out of time, as time does. You've had quite a story over the last number of years, and I just was curious because, like I said earlier, I know there are dads out there listening who are struggling with relationships, whether it be around mental illness or not, with their kids, with their partners, in the passion of the 5 Ps. And I'll ask it in 2 different ways, and then you can decide how you want to answer it. How important was it for your relationship with your kids to decide to make that change when your daughter came to you and said, "Dad, I'm disappointed in you"? Or another way to ask that is, where do you think you would be in your life right now if that was just another day like any other day and you did not make that change?
Ooh, which was the best way to answer that? So, let me answer the first one first. I'll say that my relationship with my kids is very different, and it's interesting because I had a great relationship with my kids. Like, I was not an abusive drunk or anything like that. I mean, obviously I wasn't the father I am now, but we got along really well, and it was, I don't know, I tried to like sort of insulate them from it as much as possible, I guess. I mean, unsuccessfully, of course, but our relationship was good, but it's very different now. And the reason it's very different is because, number one, they're older. But number two, I've learned so much about myself that allows me to share that with them. So, for example, whereas before I never talked about drinking because I didn't want it to even appear like it was an issue. Just, I never talked about it really. But now what I can tell my kids is I can tell them, and they're at the perfect age for it, where I can say, look, we're not going to tell you not to drink, for example. That's not going to happen, because my job is not to tell you what to and to do and what not to do. My job is to teach you the power that your choices have to shape your future. So, and my experiences can help you make more informed choices. That's what I want. That's why I'm sharing them with you. So I'm able to tell them, like, look, I started drinking when I was a teenager, and here's why. I wanted to fit in. It was more important to me to fit in than it was to be my own person. It never felt good what I was doing, but I was so desperate of being rejected, so scared of being rejected, that I just went along with people, even though it didn't feel right to me. And then I can walk them through, what that looked like, how that made me feel, what I learned from the experience, and then take that all the way up through my life and their mother's illness and why I drank and the importance of being open and being able to talk about your feelings and letting people in, to stopping and what my life has been like since I stopped, and how it is vastly different, and how much I've learned about myself, and the things that scared me that I realized were all made up. And we can talk about the things like limiting self-talk and invented fears, and and the importance of embracing discomfort and all of these things, and they know all of it. And so when I'm talking to them about things like that, I mean, our relationship can only be better. And the other reason it's better is because I'm open with them about the fact that I feel the same things that they feel. And now that they understand that wow, Dad feels scared sometimes, Dad feels uncomfortable, they know that our relationship is more than just parent to child. It's human being to human being. And they know that now that they know that I have the same feelings that they do, they will be so much more likely to come to me when they are feeling them too. And so from that point of view, our relationship is incredible. And I really believe that, and they prove it all the time, when they're worried or they want to talk about something, they know that both of us, my wife included, are a safe place to talk because we can relate to what they're saying. So I never would have been having those conversations with them if I was still drinking. And you know what? If I was still drinking, I would not be having this conversation with you. I would not be spending my life working towards the things that I am passionate about. And I wouldn't know myself like I know now. None of the things that have happened in the past 2.5 years would have happened. And I'm just so grateful. In fact, on the 2-year anniversary of my sobriety, I was driving my daughter to get some figure skates, and I pulled her over and I pulled the car over and I said, you probably don't remember this, but 2 years ago today, this is what happened and this is what you said to me. And I wanted to just look you in the eye and thank you and tell you how grateful I am that you had the courage to be honest, because your willingness to do that, or your ability to do that, changed my life. And I really want you, what she took away from that was at 9 years old, her voice changed the life of her 41-year-old dad. And think of the power that every single one of us has to, create good in this world and help people change their lives. So that moment, man, I'll tell you, that was of all my parenting moments, that was probably the most special for me.
Yeah, that was awesome. What I'm getting from that is, openness, communication. I say on this show many, many times is that I'm never going to win Dad of the Year. I am on a journey myself to help dads, including myself, out there. And some of these things that you've said tonight, tonight as this podcast is being recorded, who knows when you're going to be listening to it out there, Dad. But there's so much takeaway message so many takeaway messages that you've already given. Is there anything that you would like to clue up on? Like, I like to ask the question, if you had 2 minutes in front of a room of 1,000 dads who were just waiting to hear your 2-minute message, your greatest wake up dad message to them, because that sounded like sort of what it was, is that 2 years ago was that real wake up dad slap in the face, message that really propelled you into a completely different journey into where you are now versus where you could have been, and who knows where that could have been. But is there any message that you want to get out to the dads before we clue up tonight's show?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that I've learned and that I tell pretty much every father that I speak to is, when you share more of yourself with your kids, they will share more of themselves with you. So a lot of times as parents, we feel like we are supposed to know everything. We want to have the answers when our kids ask us questions. The problem we run into, though, is that our kids know that we don't know everything. So when we pretend that we do, everything we say becomes suspect to them. And eventually, as they get into the ages some that my kids are at right now, if you do that, they will start to tune you out because they don't trust what you say. So my message is, be open about what you do and do not know, because if you don't know something, it's a wonderful opportunity for you and your kids to find the answer together, and what a wonderful way to spend time with them. But also show your kids that you feel the same emotions that they do, that we are stronger as whole human beings, that our emotions are not something to run from. Because when you show your kids that you feel the same emotions that they feel, you'll be closer with them. They'll want to come to you. It will totally change your relationship. You'll be able to relate to them in ways that you never could if you didn't share your whole story. You might be your child having a project due at school, and you being able to say, look, I had to, for me to be able to say, look, I know what that project is like for you because I had to write this book, and I felt exactly how you are feeling right now. I felt like I didn't know what I was doing, that people were going to think it was terrible when it was finished, that I didn't even know if I'd be able to get it done. How am I going to find all this information? I get it. But I also know how I worked through it to get it done, and I can help you, and I want to help you. So let's talk about what we're feeling, and then we'll come together and we'll find a way to get this done together. And when you frame things that way, your kids will come to you because they don't want to feel disconnected with you. What they want the most of all is to feel a deep connection with their mom and dad. And you can provide that to them by the choices you make about how much of yourself you're going to share with them.
That is an awesome way to end the show. I think that is one of the best messages we've heard so far on the show. So thank you so much for that, Jason. That was just a brilliant way to end the show. Remember, guys, thebookofopen.com, or to email jason@thebookofopen.com is a way you can get in touch with him. Guys, go check out the website, www.thewakeupdadshow.com. Go to iTunes, give us a rating so we can reach more dads out there. My email is drscott@thewakeupdadshow.com. And remember, dads, an ancient proverb once said, for a man to achieve his dreams, he must first wake up. Dad, you're not alone. This is your wake-up call. Thanks again, Jason.
It was my pleasure.
Do you want to know more about the Wake Up Dad movement? Go to www.thewakeupdadshow.com to download any and all past issues of the show, claim your free gift, or to directly ask Dr. Scott any questions you have. Continue the conversation on the Facebook group Wake Up Dad. Share this podcast with other dads on iTunes or Google Play. Make sure to subscribe to the show and give us a rating so we can reach more dads. And dads, one last thing. Wake up!